Luke 18, 1 through 8, or 1 through 9. Then Jesus told his disciples a parable to show them that they should always pray and not give up. He said, in a certain town there was a judge who neither feared God nor cared what people thought. A judge who neither feared God nor cared what people thought. And there was a widow in that town who kept coming to him with a plea, grant me justice against my adversary. So this widow had been wronged. She was seeking for the wrong to be righted. She was depending on the judge to right the wrong. For some time he refused, but finally he said to himself, even though I don't fear God or care for people or care what people think, yet because this widow keeps bothering me, I will see that she gets justice, so that she won't eventually come and attack me. What is your script? What are your version?
It says attack me.
Yes.
That shocks me every time.
What does yours say, Olivia?
The same.
Same. So that she will not eventually come and attack me. Probably because he's not doing what's right. It's quite a thing.
Must be a verbal attack.
Mine says, weary me.
Okay, read it. You read it from your verse.
Yet because this widow troubles me, I will avenge her, lest by her continually coming she weary me or wear me out.
Yes. And the Lord said, listen to what the unjust judge says. And will not God bring about justice for his chosen one, who cried out to him day and night? Will he keep putting them off? I tell you, he will see that they get justice, and quickly. However, when the Son of Man comes, we find faith on the earth. I tell you, he will see that they get justice, and quickly. And the second part of the verse, however, we find faith on the earth. When the Son of Man comes, we find faith on the earth. I just rest with that. I know that I've heard it responded to at different times, but I know that unless God helps us, there's not much faith, but I want there to be faith in my heart. And it says there, keep asking. One of the things that there are certain prayers that I've prayed for years.
Yes.
There are certain prayers probably each of you have prayed
Yes.
for years that haven't been answered yet.
Correct.
And so keep asking. Keep asking. I remember 24 years ago God speaking to me and telling me that I would have a certain job. And I said, well, Jesus, how's that going to be? How is that going to be? And I don't know, so I just would pray about it. I'd lift it to him. I'd put it back to him and say, okay, Lord, you've spoken this. You've given me this promise, so we'll keep giving it back to you. And it was 8 years later. 8 years later before I took the position I have. So I know that keep pressing your prayers to him, because he will answer your prayer in time. I remember that I applied for a position, the position I'm now in with the company, and Jesus said that he was going to help me with that. Well, we interviewed and I didn't get the position. And I thought, well, Lord, You know, I had to work to not be discouraged, but Jesus helping, I think because I remember within 2 or 3 hours, I remember the phone call telling me I did not get it. And within 2 to 3 hours, I resolved that the right decision had been made and I would just rest. I needed to rest. Even though God had promised me, and I kept telling him, now, Lord, did I hear you wrong? Did I hear you wrong? You know, and lo and behold, in a very short time, things switched and he got promoted and I got the position. So God did what he said he would do, but it wasn't in the timing I thought it would be. Many times we think God should do certain things. We ask, but the timing is not right. And so we have to rest. There was a man named Jacob. Our Old Testament reading is from Genesis. And I want to start with, now Jacob had been a deceitful man. He was conniving, and he was conniving to the point that he stole his brother's birthright. He was the youngest, but yet he tricked his brother for food. And so he fled because he's afraid his brother would kill him. And I want to start reading in chapter 22. Jacob also went on his way, and the angel of God met him. When Jacob saw them, he said, the angels of God met him. My goodness. And when Jacob saw them, he said, this is the camp of God. So he named that place Mahanaim. I'm going to mispronounce a lot of words here, so you'll bear with me. And my family knows I do not pronounce words well, so just be humored as we go. Jacob sent messengers ahead of him to his brother Esau in the land of Seir, the country of Edom. He instructed them, this is what you are to say to my lord Esau. Your servant Jacob says, I have been staying with Laban and have remained there till now. I have cattle and donkeys, sheep and goats, male and female servants. Now I am sending this message to my lord that I may find favor in your eyes. So I think it was, I don't know how many years it may tell, but it's many years later. He now has family, he now has herds, and he wants to be reconciled with his brother, who at one time his brother was wanting to find him and kill him, if you remember the story. And when the messenger returned to Jacob, they said, we went to your brother Esau, and now he is coming to meet you, and 400 men are with him. Now, 400 men. You talk about an entourage. 400 men. In great fear and distress, Jacob divided the people who were with him into 2 groups, and the flocks and the herds and the camels as well. He thought, if Esau comes and attacks one group, the group that is left may escape. So he's afraid. He's fearful. We are there sometimes ourselves. And then Jacob prayed, O God of my father Abraham, God of my father Isaac, Lord, you who said to me, go back to your country and your relatives, and I will make you prosper. I am unworthy of all the kindness and faithfulness you have shown your servant. Now he was told to go back to the land of his family. He went back. God's blessed him. And I thought the prayer was, here he is in fear, and he calls out to the God of my father Abraham, my father Isaac, and then he says, I am worthy of all the kindness and faithfulness you have shown your servant. I had only my staff when I crossed this Jordan. When he arrived, all he had was his staff. But now I have become two camps. Save me, I pray, for the hand of my brother. Save me, I pray, from the hand of my brother Esau, for I am afraid he will come and attack me, and also the mothers with their children. But you have said, so now he's going to put back to God what God has promised him. Now, God, you have said, I will surely make you prosper and will make your descendants like the sand of the sea, which cannot be counted. He spent the night there, and from what he had with him, he selected a gift for his brother Esau, 200 female goats and 20 male goats, 200 ewes and 20 rams, 30 female camels and their young, 40 cows and 10 bulls, and 20 female donkeys and 10 male donkeys. And he put them in the care of his servants, each herd by itself, and said to his servants, go ahead of me and keep some space between the herds. He instructed the one in the lead, when my brother Esau meets you and asks, who do you belong to and where are you going, and who owns all these animals in front of you, then you are to say, they belong to your servant Jacob, they are a gift sent to my lord Esau, and he is coming behind us. He also instructed the second and the third, and all the others who followed the herds, you are to say the same thing to Esau when you meet him, and be sure to say, your servant Jacob is coming behind us. For he thought, I will pacify him with these gifts I am sending on ahead, and when I see him, perhaps he will receive me. I'm so thankful that our Lord receives us. And his receiving us is, the requirement of receiving us is a humble and contrite heart. Jacob's getting a little humble, getting a little contrite. So Jacob's gifts went on ahead of him, but he himself spent the night in the camp. And that night Jacob got up and took his 2 wives, his 2 female servants, and his 11 sons, and crossed the ford of the Jabbok. After he had sent them across the stream, he sent over all his possessions. So Jacob was left alone. And a man wrestled with him till daybreak. And when the man saw that he could not overpower him, he touched the socket of Jacob's hip, so that his hip was wrenched as he wrestled with the man. Then the man said, let me go, for it is daybreak. But Jacob replied, I will not let you go until you bless me. And the man asked him, what is your name? And Jacob, he answered. Then the man said, your name will no longer be Jacob, but Israel, because you have struggled with God and with humans and have overcome. Jacob said, please tell me your name. But he replied, why do you ask my name? Then he blessed him there. So Jacob called the place Peniel, saying, this is because I saw God face to face, yet my life was spared.
Wow.
The sun rose above him, and he passed Peniel, and he was limping because of his hip. Therefore this day, then it talks about what they don't eat. I want to go back to verse 28.
Yes.
Because you have struggled with God and with human. When I got there, because you have struggled with God. Now we've not thought, have you ever thought of struggling with God? And yet the scripture in the gospel is keep asking. Keep asking. most of our struggle with God is to reconcile our own shortfalls, our own carnality, and many of our prayers that we have prayed probably have to do with those areas of our life. Jesus, when are you going to help get this out of me? I've told
Yes.
several people,
Yes.
and Allie and Olivia and Will and Mike, I think, can agree with this, that if you want to be sanctified, or you want to realize where your carnality is within you, is take care of your elderly parents for a few days or a few hours. And in doing so, you will find very quickly parts of you, myself, that where there's frustration, where there's aggravation, where there's want to say certain things that probably you need to keep your mouth shut about. And so I've found it true over the last weeks. And I can say that by God's grace, Jesus has helped. And I told somebody yesterday, I said, I felt that thing coming up in me where I wanted to respond, that carnal reaction. I said, I kicked it in the head a couple of times, finally stomped it down, and finally got okay. But what I don't want to happen is for it to come up and then come out of my mouth and say things that I have to go back and say, forgive me. But yet, that's what we need to do when those things happen. He says, keep asking. The parable, keep asking. Jacob wrestled with God, wrestled with a man who was a representation of God, whether he was an angel or it says a human, but he wrestled. Jacob's wrestling was because of his own deceitfulness.
Yes. Yes.
Jacob was a deceitful man. He deceived his brother. He deceived his father-in-law. So I believe God was preparing him for what his name was to be. His name was to be Israel. Now God took a man who was deceitful. He took a man who had done things that weren't that honorable, and yet God blessed him. He wrestled with God through the night. I believe as God will help us to wrestle through things, that there'll be times when He will give us victory over certain areas of our life that we have struggled with and struggled with and struggled with. Because we all have them. Every one of us have those things in our life. Jacob looked up, and there was Esau coming with his 400 men. So he divided the children among Leah, Rachel, and the 2 female servants. He put the female servants and their children in front. Now here's the 12 tribes of Israel, except for Benjamin, wasn't born. But the rest were teenage boys, probably. Here they're going to go meet their uncle, Uncle Esau. And no doubt they're watching their father, and they're probably wondering, oh my goodness, why is my father so afraid? I don't know if he told them or didn't tell them. But he divides the children. He put the female servants and their children in front, Leah and her children next, and Rachel and Joseph in the rear. He himself went on ahead and bowed down to the ground 7 times as he approached his brother. Now, can you imagine him going through whether it's a wilderness or a field, and his brother's afar off and he's bowing down. But Esau ran to meet Jacob and embraced him. He threw his arms around his neck and kissed him, and they wept. How wonderful reconciliation is.
Yes.
How wonderful it is when we're able to be clear with each other.
Yes.
Where we don't have barriers up. They got in Jacob's humility, in Jacob's coming back, no doubt the loneliness of being away from his family for 40 years. So here he comes, and Esau, he's bowed down 7 times as he comes across the field. And yet Esau ran to meet him and embraced him. He threw his arms around his neck and kissed him, and they wept. And then Esau looked up and saw the women and the children, and he said, "Who are these with you?" he asked. And Jacob answered, "They are the children God has graciously given your servant." Then the female servants and their children approached and bowed down. Next Leah and her children came and bowed down. Last of all came Joseph and Rachel, and they bowed down. And Esau asked, "What is the meaning of all these flocks and herds I met?" "To find favor in your eyes, my lord," he said. But Esau said, "I already have plenty. My brother, keep what you have for yourself." Jacob persisted and gave them to Esau, as the story goes. What are you asking for? What are you praying for? What is your heart's desire? Keep asking. I know as we're faithful, God will do things in our asking. I remember being at Bobby's house, or at Pat's. I think it was Bobby's. Yeah, I know it was. We were meeting, and we were all going on. Everybody in the room was going to be traveling out of state, I think, within the next 2 to 3 weeks. And I thought, oh my goodness, I thought, I travel a lot, and I know that we need God's help. And so I prayed and I asked God to send angels to each one for travel, mercy, and protection. And boy, when I prayed the prayer, the Holy Spirit operated. He was going to do it. And I was so thankful. It's a little but a big thing. It's a huge thing. And I've tried to pray for God to send angels to each of my children to protect them and help them, and He's done that, and I'm very grateful for that. I was on the phone Friday with a gentleman from Chicago. He manages a large roofing company, and they do a lot of work in our stores. And I've known Tom for quite a while, and Tom just had a little baby, and he's Thomas the Fourth, little boy, and what I was talking to Tom about was when we go up our roofs, ladders, they're straight up metal ladder to the roof, you don't have anything to grab a hold of when you get to the top. So you kind of just have to climb over the hatch wall. They make a bolt on a thing, which is like a handrail. Yes. And so he he's looking at getting those and installing them for me in our stores. And so he was talking about how he said, man, those ladders y'all have, they need these because they're not real safe. And I said, well, Tom, did I ever tell you about the man who fell? And he said, no.
Trash can.
And I said, well, Tom, do you believe in God? That's how I started with it. And he said, well, yes, I do. He said, and then he said, you know, most of my friends, and I confess myself, would say I've been pretty wild. But he said, something happened to me when my son was born. And he said, I see that there's more to life than just the physical, that there is a God. He said, and I said, well, Tom, do you have a couple minutes? He said, yes. And I said, well, I'm going to tell you a God story. And I began to tell him about, because see, he's uses these ladders and he's in our stores, and I told him about starting to move the trash can out of that room, and Jesus speaking to me. And what's amazing is when God speaks to you, you don't forget those moments. But I remember I put my hands on that. It was a big one, and I moved it, and I moved it about that far. And before I could get it that far, he had stopped me. God, why are you moving the trash can? Are you frustrated with the trash can? Or are you aggravated? You know, I don't know what all it was, but something got my attention enough that I just went back like this, put it right back where it was. Little did I know, I told Tom, I said, you know, I started moving the trash can. I said, the room was perfectly clean. The only thing in it was that trash. It was probably one of the cleanest mechanical rooms I've seen, and which I was very surprised with. He said, oh, I've seen a lot of your mechanical rooms. Most of them you have to move 10 or 15 things out just to get in the door. And so, and I told him that I went up on the roof, or Joe went up on the roof, then I went up on the roof, then this other man came up, and he got to the top of the ladder, and he passed out, fell backwards, and landed butt first in the trash can. I said, we scrambled down the ladder. We had to turn the trash can over on the side because all we could see was his hands and feet sticking out of the trash can. He was in it like an accordion. You know, he was just... And I said, we pulled him out of the trash can. And he did, I said he did have a cut. But I said, on his head, but I was marveling. At that point, I hadn't even put together that Jesus had told me not to move the trash can. Because I was so caught up in helping him get out. And the guy says he's had a diabetic reaction. The manager ran and got some orange juice. You know, we got him setting up. I didn't think about it till later. And that's when I looked at my phone and I saw him. I said, Tom, I looked at my phone and I saw I missed a call from my brother. And I knew that my son was with my brother doing a roof job. And I thought, oh, Jesus. And so I called my brother, and he's next to my son on the ground. And they called an ambulance because he walked backwards off a roof. And I said, Tom, I had two men fall at the same time. And I said, you know, I've kept praying. I've been praying for God to put angels around him, to protect him, to bless him. And I said, Tom, I believe that. I asked my brother, I said, can he move his toes? Can he move his feet? He said, yeah, he's move his feet. Can he move his hands? He said, yes. I said, okay, what hospital are you going to? I'll meet you there. And I told him the story of how the doctor checked his neck and checked his back, took the neck brace off, had him stand up and said, well, you're good, son. You've been blessed. You can go home. course, Lisa wouldn't put up with that. She made him do an ultrasound and check him inside. But I said, Tom, I believe God heard the prayers. I believe also that by hearing God's voice and putting the trash can back helps spare my son and helps spare his life. And I said, and Tom was just going, oh my goodness. He was, I could tell that God was working with him. And I said, now, Tom, you have a newborn, Thomas the Fourth. And I said, would it be okay if I'd say a prayer for him? And I said a prayer for Thomas and asked Jesus to put his angels around him and to protect him. Well, I don't know what Tom thought when we got off the phone, but I know that it was not only was it telling a God story, but it was a God moment.
Yes, yes.
To be able to witness to him, to be able to share with him, and to be able to pray for his child. It makes me wonder who young Thomas is.
Yes.
So keep asking, keep praying, keep believing, keep trusting. Jesus, we thank you for your mercy.
Thank you.
Jesus, I thank you for your mercy that is new each day. I thank you that we've been taught to review what you've done. Jesus, you've asked to review, and because how easily we forget, how easily we get so tied up into the physical things of this earth that we forget the spiritual things. But Jesus, I pray that you will help us, oh God, to keep our eyes on you, keep believing, and keep asking.
Thank you, Jesus.
In Jesus' name.